standing on the unceded land of the Caddo Wichita Comanche people. We honor the generations of stewardship these indigenous peoples have given to the water, air, and land. Hi, my name is Tiffany Jackson, and I am the Director of Education for the Bishop Arts Theater Center. We're excited to bring you this interview series with several playwrights who received commission awards for our How to Be project, 10 Plays for Racial Justice. These videos are generously sponsored by our presenting sponsor, the Frederick Loewe Foundation. In 2021, we commissioned 10 Texas-born or based playwrights to pen a script based on Dr. Ibram X. Kendi's best-selling book, How to Be an Anti-Racist. BATC will produce the world premiere of this powerful, brilliant, and deeply moving festival beginning February 17th through March 6th. These performances are timely and have never been more important in the fight for our shared humanity. We are thrilled to hear from a few creative minds behind our How to Be project.
Hi everyone, my name is Morgana Wilborn. I am the fearless director of the How to Be Play Festival at Bishop Arts. And today I am so lucky that I get to talk to Alle Mims, who created the show, A Good Neighborhood. Alle, how are you doing?
I'm good. It is a beautiful day here in Harlem, so I'm happy.
Right on. Recorded live from Harlem. Well, I'm so happy that you are part of this festival and that your play resonated so much with, we've talked about this, things in my life. And I guess I want to get into really some deep thoughts, seeing as though many of the playwrights are associated with Dallas. And these stories are applicable to any given event that is occurring in our city. And last year, Dallas ISD decided to eliminate in-school suspension because of the disproportionate number of Black and Latinx students being suspended. They created reset centers. And for those who don't know, that's a place where students have a voice to express their social and emotional needs. So in your story, do you feel that Vincent, who is the father in the story, there's Vincent, Pam, and Malik, and Vincent has been perpetuating the idea that youth, especially youth of color, their voices go unheard in the education system. So I would just love to know, just your life experience, your thoughts on that, especially as we look at transformative systems that our school districts are trying to put into place to heal and reform rather than create that rigid prison to pipeline system that we all know and can't stand.
Yeah, I mean, it is sad how applicable so much of this book was to so many different places I've lived. I was raised in San Diego, East County, San Diego, El Cajon, and went to PWIs my entire life, still do. And it was so, I remember being very young and in elementary school, second or third grade, I think is when I started to notice that the Black kids in class got treated differently than the white kids. And as a very light-skinned biracial young girl, it was sort of this what do I do? Who should I be friends with? Who should I talk to? Am I going to get in trouble too? And I did face some disciplinary problems as well growing up for things that looking back, I was just upset. Having a place to be able to express myself would have solved literally all of my issues, because it was very obvious that I was just dealing with emotional problems and did not have the space to talk about that or the language to talk about it. And I think you learn very early on when you're a Black kid at a PWI that to align yourself with Blackness is to ask for trouble. And it comes from the teachers. It also can come from your parents. I know that for me, Vincent was very much inspired by my own dad, because my dad is Black, my mom is white. But if I had to say who was the most anti-Black out of them, I would say it was my dad, unfortunately. And for him, it was a defense mechanism. He didn't want me to go through the same things he went through as a kid growing up in Detroit. And so he thought it was very imperative that we were in a different school district. He thought it was good that I wasn't hanging out with Black kids. He thought it was good that I wasn't wasn't connecting with my Blackness, because he thought, this is how you're going to get ahead in life. You should be grateful that you have the choice, essentially, even though I don't feel that I do, but you have the opportunity to sort of live in this middle ground, and that's how you're going to get ahead in life. And the play is a little different just because that Malik isn't biracial. I wasn't really thinking about colorism necessarily when I was writing it. But it is sad. Like when I read through this book, I really thought it was going to tell me more about my whiteness, I guess, but I felt like it told me much more about my Blackness and about how you can be raised by an educated Black person and still perpetuate racism and still perpetuate anti-Blackness, not just within yourself, but in your environment. And so it was a wake-up call for me that, I might see myself a certain way and see that I've overcome this anti-Blackness and that I don't subscribe to certain ways of thinking, so therefore I'm not anti-Black anymore. But there was much more deeper issues, like this issue of like, what is a good school? What is a good neighborhood? And what are we saying as my generation becomes parents? What are we saying when we say, no, I don't want to raise my kid in the same neighborhood I was raised in? What does that say about the neighborhood? What does it say about you? And so that makes me really happy that Dallas ISD is taking those steps, because that is even though I didn't grow up in that system, I did tours and things. I would perform at schools, and to see the segregation of Dallas schools just from day-to-day performances, and the difference, and even how the faculty rounded up the kids at the end of a performance, it's night and day when you're at a white school versus a Black school.
Glad you say that. For predominantly white institutions, PWI, and then looking at schools that students of color, BIPOC students, live and exist in, and looking at that school to prison pipeline, you can even see it in the fixtures of the school and how they're built, including in the rounding up, the engagement of how do we talk to our kids, what assumptions do we make? And, even in the spectrum of colorism and light skin privilege, and also with, lack thereof when it comes to whiteness, white supremacy and how we are seen by white people. And thank you for sharing that story. So, because it's so important to see, in the life of the characters, how, as Black folk, we do internalize racism because of the systems in which we've been oppressed within. So kind of continuing, on that, Vincent argues or has a lively discussion with his wife, Pam, about the idea of raising their child in a more affluent neighborhood by enrolling Malik in what might be defined as a good school. Most parents want their children to have a better life. They send their children to a school where they feel they'll receive their best education, just like you talked about your dad. But they forget what the Black kids' experience might be like, living in a world where no one looks like them. And I would love to hear just even more, like, even though in your survival, because that's what it is for any Black person, person of the global majority on the spectrum, and our skin tone, our melanin, like there are still ways we have to survive, you know. In your piece, Malik survives by having this buffer and buffer buddy, a white person. So I wonder, what are the ways, because I know so many people will resonate with this, whether they are our ages, you know, existing in higher ed institutions, in corporate America, you know, in any given job or walk of life. What are the ways in which you've had to survive, to align, to breathe, to feel comfortable in the skin that you're in, as you grew up from a young person to an elder person, a person now?
Yes, it's a great question. I mean, I'm sure there are so many things I was doing and I'm still doing subconsciously that I don't even realize. But that buffer friend, that really, I mean, that is straight from my, I think, Surviving a PWI handbook, is like, you got to find a white kid who's kind of weird and who might be a little bit like more, they're more of a bad kid than you, so that you look like good next to that. You look like you're their good friend, you know? And so my parents would look at it and be like, why are you hanging out with that person? I'm like, well, because they kind of make me look good. They make me look like I'm not having issues, because they're the one who's kind of crazy and going wild and sneaking out of their parents' house. And I'm not doing any of that because I'm a good kid. I think I also, internalized it. Like I had to always perform well in class. That was another thing. I mean, how many times have we all been told, like, you got to do twice as good? And I felt that so deeply when it came to getting good grades and things like that. I mean, I would cry when I was younger if I missed an assignment or if I forgot to do something. I would cry in class because I didn't want the teachers to think I was, you know, a kid who didn't do homework or a bad kid. And I think that it puts a lot of pressure on you as a kid to think that what I say or do in class will affect my future, because that's what it came down to. Well, you need good grades, and in order to get good grades, it's not just about doing the work, it's about going that extra mile and making sure that you are doing everything right and being almost like a teacher's pet. And I think that's how I dealt with it a lot, is that I was like, as long as I'm getting good grades, like, no one can say anything about me. And I do think it did save me a couple times. I think I mentioned to you once I was almost suspended, and they brought me into the principal's office, or the vice principal. And the vice principal knew me, he knew my siblings. I had like a totally spotless record. And this teacher was in there like, I want her suspended. And the vice principal, thank God, was just like, no, like, Allie's a good kid, you know, she mouthed off once, it's not a big deal. And I was later suspended for something else. But it was like those moments like that where I felt like if I did not have those good grades, if I wasn't hanging out with like certain kids, they would have been like, yeah, suspended immediately, you know? But by the time I got to college, it became clear to me that I felt like that, like who am I? You know, like, why am I overperforming in this way? Like, I do enjoy school. I do think of myself as a smart person, but who am I outside of that if I'm not worried about my grades? Like, how am I going to survive? Like, what do I love to do? Or am I really just doing all of this just to survive?
Mm. That is so that goes into my next question. I love that you mentioned, you know, you have to be twice as better, because the mother in the story, Pam, tells Malik that he's going to have to learn to live with Mrs. Armstrong, who happens to be white, even if it means keeping his head down and remembering yes ma'ams. And it sounds a lot like what Black people have been told since slavery. And it appears that the cycle continues. It's ingrained in our speech, of no matter, like, even now we see in corporate America and things and nonprofits and ed institutions, you know, white beings who are younger than us. And it's like, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. Yes, sir, no, sir. Was this a strategy to undermine the statement, if you act better, you can sway away white people's racist behavior or negative thoughts, while you carry the entire, Black community on your back. Like, that's the thing. Like, we have this burden of, like you just said, like, I will be seen, as the good kid. But that means going into spaces carrying this ancestral trauma in our veins, this burden of making sure that the image of Blackness, of Black people with darker skin, is seen as acceptable, safe, all of that. But we carry all that trauma on our backs, in our blood, in our veins. And so when we look at the dichotomy of, the yes ma'ams, the yes sirs, person, and then we look at, like, being good and stuff, like, what are your thoughts on that balance of all of that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have an answer, because it's like, I wish it wasn't so, but I do still feel that it is necessary in certain spaces. And that I think that by the time I got to my senior year, that was what was imparted on me, was like, hey, I know you're having problems, but just make it through your senior year and you don't have to worry about this. But then you get to college and it's like, well, just make it through your freshman year. You don't have to worry. You make it through your sophomore year. And it seems, and then you get into corporate America, you get to nonprofits, you get to a theater where you're the only Black person there. And it's like, oh, you just have to make it through this one meeting. So unfortunately it doesn't end. And I feel like I have been let into so many predominantly white spaces because I have been seen as like the safe Black friend. And it's like, on the one hand, I'm so honored to be there because at least there's someone. But on the other hand, like you said, there's just generations and billions of people who I'm supposed to be the expert about. Anytime they have a question about Black theater, well, what does Allie think? As if I'm like a historian or anything like that. I'm like, I'm a child. But I wish I knew the answer for me now is to not seek out those places, but it's like, even that is so hard. I mean, I am so grateful that once I got to grad school and after I graduated college, I think that's the first time that I really started intentionally trying to make connections with other BIPOC artists. Up until then, it had just sort of been like, no, I want to work at the theaters everyone else works at. I want to work the jobs everyone else wants. And they just happen to be white. And I had to really like look inside and say, like, okay, am I just accidentally stumbling into all these white spaces? Or am I subconsciously saying, no, this is where I need to be successful? This is where I've been told success is at these white institutions. And so I think it has been hard for me now that I'm trying to make my own art and work as a professional. It's like, where do you put your energy? Where do you put your time? Because I think that's really important. I think that in this play, Malik is, about to be in his senior year. They're not going to pull him out of school at this point, like kind of like point of no return. But maybe they'll think about a historically Black college, for him moving forward or something. And I think for me, I'm now, as I'm like looking out into the professional world, I'm like, where am I putting my time so that I'm not spending the whole time just trying to convince a group of people to let someone else besides me in? Like, is that how I want to spend my time? But on the other hand, I do think I have a privilege in those spaces that I want to use. So I do feel that I'm balancing my time, and I've always felt that. I mean, like, smallest violin for the biracial person, but like you always kind of feel that way of like, well, if they do let me in, maybe I could be that change. So I think now I think about splitting my time almost between these two worlds of like, if they're going to let me in, I'm going to go in and I'm going to try to say something and change something, but I am not going to spend my entire life pounding against the doors of these white institutions begging to let me have one seat at the table when there are Black institutions and other places that would welcome me immediately and who want me there and who have plenty of space, not just for me, but for other people as well. So I do think I feel an obligation to sort of split my time at this point. And maybe that'll change. Maybe I'm slowly shifting away, but as long as they're paying me and I can have a platform, I'm like, okay, you've twisted my arm.
Right on. I mean, it's important to, and that's the thing, right? In the white supremacy structure, we've been told to attain towards, like we were talking about earlier, and you mentioned earlier, towards whiteness and the white ideal and, the institutions, the careers, the people, the look, everything. And when we start saying, like, what about our own? I'd like to make this, I want to tell my own stories. I want to show up as myself. I want to, make things with my people, whatever that is defined as, an intersectionality of ethnicity, of gender, et cetera, et cetera. And then, we're seen as complaining just because we desire to have all of the things in which, what already comes in the package of what is born and bred into white humanity, and then no matter how hard our parents, and I'm looking through the biracial gaze as well, want to create that as their survivor skill. My mama did the same thing as your daddy. Putting that out there. It's not helpful. It's not helpful. It's just trying to tell people, like, even when we look through the sphere of gender identity, that, like, it's going to be easy just to be binary. It's going to be easy, but it's like, even through the biracial life, it's not just binary. It's this really interesting dynamic. And how white circles see us as safe, and therefore they say crazy things, and I saw that in the character of Malik in this play, even though he is not listed as biracial or even listed as, non-gender conforming or anything, right? But he could be in the scope of Blackness, right? And then seeing, like, him just wanted to be a regular boy and live a whole life. And this reminded me of one of those sitcoms from the 90s. Like,
exactly. Yes, that's what I was thinking when I was writing it.
I'm so happy you said that, because we were all like, did Alle write this as a sitcom? This feels like TGIF episode of Family Matters. And we've been literally playing it out like that. Don't want to give it up to the audience, but and I don't even want to reveal why Malik got in trouble, because we're going to save that, because it's so interesting. That was, if we may have mentioned it, I hope you forgot, because that just shows the plight of, what Black people get in trouble for. I used to go to the principal office because I wore a head wrap to school. As tall as Badu's old style. And I used to get sent to the office all the time. And it was like, this is so dumb. And so, it's just things like that. And it even helped me question my own bias and internalized racism from when I was a teacher. Which is my testimony I continue to heal from and wanting to learn. And hopefully, like, when I meet my students, like, we can have more places of healing, because they've had to teach me a lot. Because we don't know that, like, sleeping in class means I didn't get any sleep because, ma'am, I don't have a home. I live in a shelter. I just so happen to be a Black person who lives in a shelter, and I don't get no sleep. Like, these are like, et cetera, et cetera. I've been studying all night, not to give us the poor Black plight, it's any dynamic. We just so happen to be Black. And so these are the things that, reading this story, I think of as a past educator, as, a leader now, a leader in my light skin with white heritage, all of it. And I'm really excited where people can see two Black parents being able to talk through their internalized racism of gentrification and, seeing that as good. And we're going to, go to a good, better place. But it's like, this place raised us. And I think this is good. Look at how we came out. We're college educated, and then looking at, the dynamic of the child and what they are forced to live in and exist and survive in, and how they feel about that and having a voice. This literally gives the child a voice, which is such a blessing that you've written. I just want to open the space as we end our conversation to any other thoughts that you just want to make sure the audience feels when they see a good neighborhood.
Gosh. Well, I hope they see themselves and see that. I think if this book has taught me anything, it's that racism goes so much deeper than just hate crimes or murders or anything like that. And that one thing that he points out a lot in that book is that we need to stop calling it microaggressions. We need to stop calling it insensitivity. It's racism. It's racism. Like, it might be a very small moment, but it is racism. And I think it was hard for me to write that character of Vincent, because I think I have in my head that I don't want to write, shitty Black dad characters, and so I hope that the audience can see like the hope and the breaking of the cycle, even if the cycle hasn't broken that day that the play takes place. I hope that they can see that it's never too late to start looking inside yourself. If you think that you have finished the work inside yourself, I guarantee you haven't. I know I haven't. And so I hope that they're left looking at themselves, but also feeling hopeful that the cycle can and will end.
Right on. I want to thank you so much, Alle. Number one, for this piece. It's brilliant. It's lovely. It's loving. It's such a beautiful love letter to Black families and just our stories. And that sense of hope is ingrained. It is such a lovely piece. Thank you for sharing your truth. Thank you for sharing your story and sharing this story with the community. A good neighborhood will be part of the festival. We can't wait to see you all at previews 17th, 18th of this month. We go on for like 3 weekends strong. So thank you, Alle. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. And thank you for directing everything.